All right, I'd like to do a quick video, if I could, on both the types of ships that are involved in the naval aspect of Pacific War, and also how to form a task force, what the limitations are, and some of the tactical considerations you should be thinking about as you do that, at least as I've discovered it as I played. Sometimes to my detriment when I didn't think about some of these ideas. So hopefully that'll help you as you plan. First of all, I want to highlight that there's 5 types of capital ships. Everything else is not considered non-capital. So the capital ships are battleships, BB, BC battle cruisers, which the US has and British have some BCs, I think. The Japanese do not have battle cruisers, I don't believe. Regular carrier, CV, slide over here. Light carrier, CVL, and then the CVS, which is actually, I don't think the US or the Allied side has CVSs. These are considered seaplane carriers. Notice you can only launch seaplanes off of these. They don't have the normal launch factor number in the middle bottom. Not very big ships, but they're considered capital ships. So those are the 5 capital ships. All the rest are considered non-capital. And we have things such as the cruiser, CA, the destroyer, DD. Let's get this out of here. The seaplane tender, destroyer escorts, DE, and then some even more specific types of non-capital ships. We have an escort carrier. Talk about that in a second. They can launch planes. You see the 3 on them in the middle bottom. And then we have transport ships. And the first of which is the amphibious transport, but well, they're actually called destroyer transports. These cannot do more than a regiment. I think it's a regiment of steps, as opposed to the next one, which is the AA. These are going to be your heavy-duty transports for assaults and transporting troops. They can do divisions size ground units. So these are the heavy-duty ones. These APDs can be used for transporting things like battalions, regiments, marine units, smaller marine units. The Japanese actually can use their destroyers for doing the same transport, amphibious transport, as the APDs. So keep that in mind. You can use those destroyers the Japanese have for that. When you put together a task force, I'm going to backtrack a second here. Let's highlight some of the obvious concepts behind these individual ship codes. These 5 capital ships are all considered unique. In other words, this Enterprise carrier, it's 1 ship. The New Mexico, it's 1 ship. As you go over to the cruiser and the right here. Where's my light cruiser? Did I have the light cruiser over here? Okay, found my light cruiser, my CL. And so we've got, put these together here. So there's my CVE. Okay, those three are all representative of 4 ships each. So there's actually 12 ships with these 3 counters. And then you have all the rest: amphibious transport, destroyer transport, seaplane tender, destroyer escort, and then regular destroyers. All those are representative of 6 ships each. So with those 5 counters, there's actually 30 ships here. And it starts to make more sense when you think about that, because if you're expecting these task forces to have like 24 ships in it, that's perfectly reasonable, because if you have a couple of destroyers and a couple of cruisers, and then I'll just put a couple battleships and a battle cruiser and 2 light carriers and a carrier. So those ships actually represent 6, 12, 18 plus 8 more. This is actually 24 ships in the task force. So when you think about it that way, it all makes sense. That's very logical. So you have to get your head around this multiple ship idea. Okay, so what can you put into the task force, or where you can put it? All the capital ships can go in the screen or the core, and anything that's transporting troops, like these, the destroyer transport, the amphibious, big amphibious transports, those can go into the core if they're transporting units. The carriers have to go into the core. They have to be here. The carriers, these particular carriers, can never be in the screen. The only carrier this is an exception to is the escort carrier, and that is the CVE right here. CVEs have to go on the screen. So these 3 have to go in the core, or 2 I should say, and also CBS. They have to go in the core, and the CVE has to go on the screen. All right. The other non-capital ships always have to go on the screen. Throw a cruiser in here too, although this is illegal because you can't have 5. I'll take a destroyer out here. So those have to be in the screen, the non-capital ships. The only non-capital ones that can go in here are transports. All right. You could put battleships out here if you wanted to. So let's take a look at maximum involvement here. I've got 6 capital ships in the core and 4 in the screen. Now the trick is, when you're putting things together, you want to think about both, actually 3 separate ideas. One is anti-air. So what are you going to be able to have for flak? That's a pretty big deal. But here's the trick. You can only use 4, if an attack comes in on this task force, you can only use 4 ships here, or 2 in the core. That's it. So in this case, and you have to choose which side you're going to use. So if you're taking a look at the flak numbers to try to decide which side is going to fire, typically it's going to be the screen. In this case, it might help to have this battle cruiser in the screen instead. Even though it's a capital ship, it can still go out here. So in this case, if I had switched that to the screen, I could fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then one of these, that's 7. So I could have 7 flak, as opposed to the top 2 ships over here would only be 2 each, so there's 4. So typically you're probably going to fire from the screen unless you don't have too many units left in there. If it's important for you to have a good flak attack in your task force, then start to look at those numbers and pick the units that are going to be best for that. Another obvious thing to think about is, what do you have as far as gunnery? And those are the bottom naval attack factors that you have for gunnery. And obviously 7 is close range, 3 medium range, and 1 is long range. And as you start flipping these over, you realize, oh, some of these aren't even effective at all in long range or even medium range. You look at the destroyer escort. When you see an X, you can't even fire at long range. A 0, or a 0 with an exponent 4, you actually can fire, but it's not very effective. It's a small chance of hit each time. So, and obviously you flip the carriers over, they do not have gunnery factors. You need to protect them. So gunnery factors are important. Also, once you get to campaign or strategic scenarios, start to look at, I'll even zoom a little bit more, these little black highlighted numbers are this anti-sub warfare. And notice that this cruiser is pretty decent with its anti-flak, but as far as sub goes, nothing. Now some of the carriers, actually, you can see here with the Enterprise, it actually gets a ASW attack. So that's actually something to consider when you have the carrier task force and there's anti-sub warfare going on. Don't forget that you have those available. And then the last thing to look at is bombardment factors. And as you flip this over, it's a little harder to read the little B, but it is there. There's the B6, so that's pretty good. Keep in mind all those different factors as you're starting to put together your task forces. Sometimes in some of the smaller scenarios, you don't get a lot of choices, but as you get into, I mean, even if you look at Midway gives you some choice as far as how you're going to form your task forces for the Japanese as you set out. There are some restrictions, the 4 carriers have to be together, etc. But as you get into campaign and strategic scenarios, that really comes into play in how you're forming your task forces. So that's just a little bit of an idea of what your limitations are and what things you should think about as you do that. Again, if you have any helpful hints or ideas you've come across that will help anybody else, that'd be great, and you can put it in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next round.